Families are founded from piety, fear of divinity, and chaste marriages. From these families arise the first domains in civilization. Those born from the divine observing union are considered noble. Nobility originates from moral virtue and adherence to divine and familial laws. Early heroes and giants possess physical and moral superiority. Hebrews maintained correct human proportion. Marriage, burial, and familiar structures from the three principal bases of the human society under divine order. Cultivated lands plowed under divine observances serve as the first altars and sites of human settlement. The plow signifies fortitude, labor, and the first cultivation of the earth. Early cities arise from settled families who transformed sacred woods into habitable lands. These altars provide protection for the weak and enforce social order. Familiar servants initially served the families of virtue, providing labor and security. Early humans are guided by piety, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. Virtue is effective only when grounded in religious and reverence for divine order. Children are educated in familial and religious obedience before comprehending the republic or its laws. The eternal order separates those whose minds command from those whose bodies serve. This principle underlies all civil governance. Nobles claim divine ancestry. Familiar servants are considered of lesser bestial origin due to unholy couplings. Justice and piety are natural foundations of all nations and arise from proper observance of divine signs. Familiar servants lacking divine observance eventually rebel against noble dominion in agrarian disputes. Early migrations and conflicts reflect natural struggles over land, survival, and social hierarchy. Altars, plows, and rudders symbolize both protection and domination within early civilization. The origin of war, peace, glory, and nobility are tied to the moral actions of early founders. Republics endure or collapse according to whether their founding principles are virtuous. History is not merely historicism, it is the study of origins. Principles are first beginnings. Doctrines must begin from the original matter of which they treat. To understand a subject, one must trace it to its primordial source. Study begins where the subject matter began. The new science starts at the first moments of human society. Human institutions, family, property, and state arise from primordial beginnings. To study the origins of society, one must consult myth, legend, and early history. Early humans were gross, wild, and uncultured, like the big feet of legend. These represent the first fathers in familiar and civil society. Philosophical thought must be likewise returned to its original human context. Frogs of Epicurus, cicades of Hobbes, and the simpletons of Grotius. The nature of nations is their nacimiento, the way they were born. Culture is an extension of nature. The law and character of nations arise from their birth conditions. The hour of birth of a nation determines its character, trajectory, and historical destiny. Understanding nations requires observing their primordial signs and auguries, akin to astrology or divination. The new science is a science of signs and wonders, returning to the study of augury. Observing the sky and auspices provides insight into the foundation and fate of societies. Temples of the sky marked by augurs correspond regions of human and civil significance. Contemplation of these signs reveal the original principles governing the birth and growth of nations. All subsequent developments reflect primordial archetypal principles. The ruling principle of society, law, and culture exists in the beginning. Origins are primeval leaps, primary causes in primeval times. Yeah, you're a faggot. Yeah, this is great. You guys are a bunch of morons. Historical study requires a return to first beginnings. They like to write words they can't say in person. Cool, you can spell. That's awesome. The new science observes that heroic people often rise and fall under the guidance of divine or religious order. Oppressed groups seek refuge and safety, migrating from uninhabited lands. This explains the westward spread of Near Eastern and Egyptian people along the Mediterranean. Migration in the heroic age occurs not from invasion, trade, or colonization, but from extreme necessity imposed by heroic law. Overseas colonies of the heroic age spread humanity across the seas, just as earlier migration spread it over land. Language and letters develop after the founding of nations, with letters emerging later than spoken language. Native languages arise in the lands where people settle, later blending with foreign languages due to migration. Etymology distinguishes between native words reflecting the natural order of human development: forests, fields, huts, villages, cities, academies, philosophy. Foreign words borrowed from other languages, reflecting external influence. Letters are discovered gradually. No written records exist at the time of Homer, demonstrating that writing emerged after oral traditions. The earliest civil power derives from the union of patriarchal authority exercised by heads of families who are also priests or diviners. The fasces, the symbol of the union of patriarchal and religious authority. Rulers answer only by divine will. Regents, senates, to control uprisings of familiar servants, with the first kings arising naturally to lead these early orders. Agrarian law is the first law, granting plebeian domain over land while nobles retain civil authority. This division creates three domains: natural domain, land granted to plebeians; civil domain, controlled by nobles; eminent domain, centralized sovereign authority. Cities form from two communities: nobles who command and plebeians who obey. Republics arise from armed power, later codified into laws. Wars secure peace, establishing the foundation of civil governance. Fealty establishes hierarchical obligation. rustic fealty, plebeians to nobles, noble military fealty, nobles to higher heroic order. These early forms of governance provided the structural basis for later European regimes. The census originates from obligation of plebeians to nobles. Commerce begins as exchange of land and obligation, not through coinage. Money emerges only after civil power is established. Public treasuries arise to sustain collective obligations, especially during wartime. Colonies emerge in two forms: overseas colonies, heroic migrations for survival; inland colonies, vassals cultivating land under obligation to nobles. Heroic law rests on force. Moderate duels and private wars serve as early mechanisms of justice, appealing to divine providence to settle disputes. Public wars arise as extensions of these private conflicts, enforcing external justice and securing societal stability. Coinage and formal commerce emerge after civil authority is established. History is not linear. It proceeds in cycles of recurrence. Each cycle of history comprises distinct ages that reflect the maturation and decline of human societies. The course of civilization follows three primary ages. Age of the gods. Humans live under divine governance. Society is guided by auspices, oracles, and sacred institutions. Age of heroes. Aristocratic commonwealths arise. Exceptional individuals dominate due to natural superiority. Age of men. Recognition of human equality emerges. Popular commonwealths and monarchies develop. These ages correspond to forms of language: divine, sacred hieroglyphs, heroic, symbolic, metaphorical language, human, ordinary, everyday expressions. Each cycle progresses through stages of social and moral development followed by decline. Necessity, utility, comfort, pleasure, luxury, madness, waste. Decline is inevitable as human societies move from divine guidance to self-indulgence and moral decay. Plato's metaphysics, emphasizing eternal ideas, is more suitable for understanding moral and historical development than Aristotle's material principle. Civilization is formed not externally, Aristotle's God as potter, but internally as ideas emanate and shape matter, culture, and society. The Egyptian wisdom, civilization as knowledge, begins in antiquity. Societies must be understood in terms of their ancient cultural division. Understanding history requires recognizing the foundational human creation, such as religion, governance, and social custom. Human societies evolve from divine dependence to heroic action and ultimately to rational human equality. Language and culture codify stages of development, preserving the memory of early ages in symbolic, heroic, and ordinary forms. History is intelligible through patterns of recurring events. The cyclical course provides orientation and meaning. Awareness of these cycles allows humans to perceive the rise, peak, and decline of nations as part of a larger intelligible order. To know history is to reconstruct it imaginatively, connecting past events with universal patterns. The observer must combine memory, fantasia, and ingreggino to perceive the moral, cultural, and social dynamics of the past. Civilizations progress through three principal ages. Age of the gods, society is governed by sacred institutions. Age of heroes, aristocratic or exceptional individuals dominate. Age of men, humans recognize equality, societies develop popular commonwealths and monarchies. All civilizations originate in disclosure of a mystery or secret. The sacred precedes the profane. Religion is the first civil institution. It establishes the altar, the foundational symbol of society. 3 universal customs among nations reflect sacred origins: solemn religion, solemn marriage, solemn burial. These divine institutions form the basis from which all human institutions later emerge. Civilization expands through the progressive revelation of its mysteries. Decline occurs when mysteries are exhausted or profaned. The sacred becomes secular. Cultural forms mark the transition. Ideogram, symbolic, enigmatic, sacred preserves mystery and poetic power. Alphabet, democratic, explicit, and secular, represent the triumph of public knowledge but signals the loss of mystery. Civilization can only be renewed through the discovery of new mysteries. Renewal is driven by imagination, not democratic consensus. The poet or visionary acts as the unacknowledged legislator of humanity. The sovereign power of the imagination transforms and revitalizes human society, creating the conditions for a new cycle of cultural development. Human institutions arise from the interaction of divine guidance, social practice, and imaginative creation. Historical development is both cyclical and providential. Civilizations rise, flourish, decline, and may be renewed through imaginative reconstruction. 3 ages of rule: age of gods, age of heroes, age of men. Natural progression, aristocracy declines into popular republics. Popular republics collapse through fraction and faction and war into monarchies. Once humanity reaches this stage, it oscillates between republics and monarchies but does not return to aristocracy. Mixed constitutions exist only temporarily. They are praised but unsustainable. Heraldic origins, noble insignia, public insignia, military standards, money, heraldry and blazonry, hieroglyphs as history. Balance, equality of republics, caduceus, end of perpetual war, emergence of diplomacy, heralds, peace treaties, hieroglyphic, heroic, and epistolary. Language and letters, language and writing rise together, evolving from poetic expression into prose. Early peoples thought in imaginative poetic types. Achilles' strength, anger as type, not individual. Mystic theology, age of gods, sacred law, oracles versus divine authority. Heroic jurisprudence, age of heroes, scrupulous adherence to words, civil equality, reason of state, law tied to the private interest of nobles. Natural equality, popular republics establish universal laws for the common good, which persist into monarchies. In barbarism, nations are confined to borders for survival. With maturity, they develop tolerance, law, and the sparring of conquered peoples. Providence transforms private vices into public virtue. To trace meanings across ages and languages, a mental dictionary of poetic origins is essential. Weak reasoning and limited speech force early peoples into vivid, imaginative, and metaphorical expressions. Myth equals poetic truths encoding law, memory, and early wisdom. The occult tradition is aristocratic. Priests and nobles preserve sacred knowledge as secret doctrine. Sacred equals secret. Mystery is withheld from the plebeian class to maintain hierarchy. Heroic commonwealths are ruled by the few whose own claims divine descent. The heroic order legitimates itself by religion, theocracy, grounds aristocracy. Heroes are God-fearing giants, contrasted with impious, lawless giants who practice promiscuity and communism of goods and women. Civilization is inherently a class structure. History is the history of class struggle. Cities originate in two orders, the nobles to command, the plebeians to obey. Religion is the root of aristocracy. Sacred institutions sanctify inequality. Process equals profanation, secularization, the decline of sacred authority. In class struggle, plebeians deny aristocratic religion, rejecting claims of divine descent. The impious, promiscuous, lawless nomads lived as wild beasts, weak and unhappy. Fleeing violence and misery, they sought refuge at the altars of the pious and strong. The heroes killed the violent among them and took the weak under protection. Refugees were received under the just law of protection, but were reduced to servile labor for the heroes. Society originates from two heterogeneous classes. The first comers, pious, family-bound, religious, motivated by chastity and propagation. The second comers, refugees, motivated by utility and survival, entering society in servile dependence. Nobility begins in lordly friendship. Plebeian society begins in necessity and utility. It begins by conventional Renaissance rhetoric, but descends through it to uncover a deeper method. Philosophy and rhetoric are not identical, but inseparable. Truth is reached by reuniting philosophy with its rhetorical and poetic origins. The new science is neither Cicero in modern dress nor Cartesian analysis, but a new book of wisdom. No partisan side and quarrel between ancients and moderns, descending beneath the opposition of the archae and the governing roots of knowledge. The heroic mind is at its zenith when it balances opposites without collapsing them into synthesis. Nostalgia for the ancients is sterile. Contemptuous novelty is equally barren. Ancient philosophy unified all knowledge under eloquence and wisdom. Modern education splits science and arts, producing specialists without coherence. Cartesian method intensifies the fragmentation by reducing truth to geometric rigor. Eloquence reunites pathos and logos, heart and reason into living whole. Socratic and Platonic academies modeled this balance. Eloquence adorned philosophy, and philosophy gave substance to eloquence. Blind scholasticism and abstract Cartesianism both fail because they lack eloquence's balance. The enthemy is the instrument of eloquence, reasoning charged with rhetorical lightning. Wit is the inner faculty of making connections and internal enthemy, linking disparate things. True elegance balances the macrocosm of public argument and the microcosm of inner thoughts.